Wastewater treatment plant, I believe that's an ongoing thing that's been around here ever since I've been here. And currently the city is embarking on upgrading its own facility. You were part of a public hearing and authorized those plans to be submitted to the MPCA. There was a hearing held additionally last year on the facility plan. The village provided a letter of comment on that hearing as part of it, and went into the proceedings, and they, to my recollection, had no negatives about it. They were positive about helping the city, or thinking that the city should move forward and upgrade its plan. So I don't know if this is just filler or if it's something they really do want to talk about. I do know that our request to them to extend the current agreement, which expires, I believe, September 2014 now. When we first started working on it, it was like 6 years. Now it's down to 3 years or so, 4 years. That has not produced any final extension terms of the agreement. And I think both boards need to be cognizant that, you know, this is not going to, the days keep moving on pretty fast, and all of a sudden we'll be there September 2014. The agreement will terminate. The service, I don't think, quite honestly, will ever be allowed to be terminated by the MPCA. And so then there will be a scramble to figure out what do the new terms be.
Is this still the original agreement?
Yes.
That needs a lot of work.
Yes. I think, though, again, in their side of the issue, they believe they have looked at several. They've had, you know, they've entertained a lot of different engineers and schools of thought about, you know, are there options that you could go to, and they've looked at pretty much about everything that's out there. And I think the extension service was the one that gave them the most hope. But quite honestly, it seems like the MPCA just needs to at some point say, this is what's going to happen, and like it or not, that's the way you people got to get it on and get her done. Because if they wait too long and allow them to continue to think that there's other options, and from what I hear there are no other options, it's going to get, you know, it's going to get down to the point where there's not enough time to react. And as Ted knows, this is a pretty involved document that has a lot of things that both sides find irritable. And we need to find a way to get that less irritable and get agreement on it.
Sanitary sewer district?
Well, we could certainly look at it again. We did look at it, I can't remember, was that about a year and a half ago, when before we started the facility plan. We brought in people to talk about that from the city's perspective. Now, I'm not talking about other perspective. And the perspective was that it was not in our best interest unless people were going to throw a lot of cash in to make that happen. And I think the crowning blow probably came from the auditor, our auditor, who has experience, and he audits a couple of those, and he described some of the problems that he's had or witnessed, and they aren't pretty. And so I don't think there was any desire to expose the city to that kind of liability. And I suppose the other part is the facility that we have via this facility plan is upgradable for, you know, compared to what you could spend on a new one, obviously, for a lot less money. And that, I think, the prudent person would say that's the way you proceed. And then, of course, the other issues, I just note that, you know, if there's, you know, and hopefully they are sincere about other issues relevant, and there's no doubt that I know a couple of those are. You know, there's several, and you perhaps have even more that you'd like to add to the list, but certainly police services, economic development, parks, recreation, libraries, swimming pools. They're all things that we provide here that we need some assistance if we're going to keep them here.
So your recommendation on the meeting?
You know, I recommended once before, and I learned from that, don't recommend.
Just a full disclosure kind of thing related to the utilities. I'm personally in preliminary discussions with the EDA and planning board over there in the village about developing some property adjacent to South Rushford. So. And if that happens, I would become a customer. So I suppose I need to excuse myself from any votes on these things. I don't know exactly what my exposure is, but at this point anyway.
Well, my concern, quite honestly, is some of the discussion, for example, on number 1, would be the kind of discussion that you'd probably want to, you know, if you don't want me doing it, at least when you do it, you probably want to do it so that you can have a little give and take and not be positioned as it's an all or none. And when you have a public meeting, generally it's all or none, and it's, at least from what I've seen, there haven't been a lot of give and take, and you need to get to that point, or some of these things, some of their solutions that they propose will, you know, almost overtake you, because they're not in interests of our economy here, but they get the job done. It's just that they're not in the city's best interest. And I know everybody looks at it, you know, and some people can look at it more globally. My job is to look at it from the perspective of the city of Rushford. And that's what we're trying to protect.
How do we start? How do we start contact? Should we start with just 2 and 2? 2 council members, 2 of their council members? Have a discussion before we do a full council, joint council meeting?
We had that on the wastewater, and I believe the last, I don't know, Robert, I think you were part of one meeting. You know, prior to that, it was Mr. Amiro before his passing away. And we'd spent, you know, a lot of meetings hashing over the issues, and, you know, everybody was friendly, and, I mean, nobody was violent, but obviously there's differences of opinion, and it all comes down to, I think the village still needs to decide, does it truly want to go its own way, or does it want to buy a product from the city? And that's what I think their research has been trying to determine for them. And you know, I don't go to those meetings, so I don't know what they're learning, but hopefully they're learning that at some point the costs of doing their own thing are probably just not realistic. Now in the interim, of course, Peterson got frustrated and went their own way and bought a package plant that of course they believe will last for many years. From what I'm hearing, they should probably divide that in 2, and that's not going to be very cheap for them as a community to handle it even on the long-term basis. So, you know, whether they'll be back, and then would have a regional plant made more sense? Maybe it would have. Or would they have been better off just building a line to bring it to Rushford? Maybe it would have. At the time, everybody had this feeling you couldn't go over 4.5 miles with a line and get the push. There's lines now that are going 7 and 8 miles. So, but I know in talking to the new consul over there, you know, trying to see if they still would resurrect, they just felt they were too far into it and needed to commit.
It's the council's pleasure.
I just soon sit down and talk with a couple of council members. Just to see how far apart